Imagine this. You're drifting through the cold emptiness between stars, the hum of your ship the only heartbeat you've got, when your scanners pick up something you've never seen before. And before I take you there, hit that like button, drop a comment telling me what you do and subscribe, because you won't believe where this goes. Now, let's begin. Jace Rowan's cockpit was awash in the pale green glow of outdated displays, their flickering digits counting down the minutes until his cargo bay sealed the last of the raw ore. He leaned back in the pilot's chair, boots up on the console, helmet tossed to one side. The silence outside was absolute, broken only by the distant grind of the mining rigs finishing their run on the asteroid's surface. Out here, on the edge of the mapped systems, nobody came looking for trouble. Or so he liked to tell himself. The sensor ping came without warning, sharp, clean and wrong. Not the jittery echo of space debris, not the rhythmic pulse of a friendly transponder. This was a distress beacon. Jace froze, squinting at the screen as coordinates scrolled in angry red. Unregistered frequency. No ship ID. Range, 4,000 clicks, drifting. He rubbed a hand over his face. Unregistered usually meant illegal, and illegal usually meant lethal. His better judgment told him to let it fade into static and keep mining. But the feed was repeating in short, ragged bursts, like the ship on the other end was barely holding it together. Of course it's dying, Jace muttered. Why else call me? He tapped the console. His freighter's engines coughed to life with a rumble that rattled the hull. It wasn't built for heroics, it was built for hauling bulk freight and surviving in places civilized captains avoided. But Jace had worn a uniform once, and some parts of a man didn't rust no matter how much you wanted them to. The distress signal led him into the black shadow of a debris field, shards of metal glinting like knife blades in the faint light of a dying star. He throttled down, letting his ship drift, scanning for movement. The wreck appeared out of the dark like a ghost, sleek, predatory lines scorched and twisted, hull ruptured in 3 places. Alien without a doubt. Not one of the friendly ones either. Son of a... Jace's breath caught as the database pulled up a shaky hollow image. Valor warship. Apex hunter race. Rumor was they'd taken down whole planetary defense grids before breakfast. Rumor was if you saw one it was already too late. So why was this one floating here, bleeding atmosphere and power? He cycled the docking clamps, nudged his freighter in close and ran the tether line. The hull creaked as the airlock sealed. Inside, the wreck smelled of scorched wiring and something sharp, almost metallic, blood maybe. The corridors were jagged wounds and steel, lights flickering in the haze of escaping coolant. He followed the signal to what must have been a containment chamber. The door was half melted, edges blackened from weapons fire. Inside, suspended in a failing energy cage, was a creature that made every survival instinct in him scream to turn back. It was tall, 7 maybe 8 feet, its body all hard angles and coiled muscle, mottled skin patterned in shades that shifted with the light. Even slumped forward, it radiated a kind of focused menace, the kind you only saw in predators that had never once doubted they were at the top of the chain. Shackles of some alien alloy bit into its limbs, glowing faintly from the strain of holding it. Jace checked the cage's readouts. Minutes left before total collapse. Behind him, his suit's radiation meter clicked faster. The ship's power core was unstable, too unstable. He stood there for a long second, every memory of the war pounding in his head. He'd seen what Valor hunters could do. He'd also been on the other side of the choice, left in the mud on a burnt-out moon bleeding out, because extraction wasn't worth the risk. Damn it. He cut the cage power manually. The restraints disengaged with a hiss. The alien sagged, then collapsed forward into his arms, heavier than it looked. The weight nearly knocked him over. Hope you're worth this, Jace muttered, hauling it over his shoulder. He retraced his steps through the ruined corridors, every step slower as the air grew hotter. The ship groaned around him, its death rattle building toward a scream. He shoved the alien through his freighter's airlock just as the first shockwave hit. The tether line snapped free, slamming the freighter sideways. Jace threw himself into the pilot's seat, hammering the throttle. Behind them, the Valor warship tore itself apart in a bloom of white fire that lit the debris field like a second sun. The inert body lay stretched on the medbay table, hooked into a tangle of diagnostic cables. The monitors struggled to read its vitals. Pulse irregular, oxygen saturation far below human norms. Jace had no idea what counted as stable for a Valor, but he'd seen enough soldiers to know this one was hanging by threads. He dropped into the seat beside the bed, rubbing his eyes. Out here, rescue was supposed to mean credits or gratitude, maybe both. But the Valor didn't barter in thanks, and Jace had a sinking feeling he just painted a target on his back. The alien stirred once, its eyes half opening. The pupils were vertical slits, set in irises that shimmered like molten gold. They fixed on his face with a focus so sharp it felt like being weighed, measured, and recorded. Then they closed again and the alien's breathing slowed. Jace leaned back. Great. Just great. The freighter's autopilot engaged, pulling them clear of the debris field and into the slow crawl toward safer space. Outside, the stars slid by in cold, silent arcs. He thought about turning around, finding a station, dropping the alien with someone better equipped to deal with it. But the truth was he'd made his choice back in that shattered chamber, and whatever came next was already locked in. The medbay's hum was the only sound for a long while. Jace sat there until the console pinged a fuel check. As he rose, he glanced once more at the still form on the table. Hope I didn't just doom us both, he said quietly and left the room. In the corridor, the ship's lighting dimmed to its night cycle. The engines purred, steady and sure. And somewhere in that silence, the alien's eyes opened again, golden and unblinking, watching him go. The sound that pulled Jace from half-sleep was nothing like the groan of the freighter's old hull or the gentle hiss of its life support vents. It was low and guttural, a sound layered with menace even through the thin wall of his cabin. He was upright in seconds, pulling on his jacket and slipping the small sidearm from the holster mounted by his bunk. The medbay door slid open to reveal a very awake, very large Veiler sitting upright on the table where Jace had left him. The alien's gaze snapped to him, eyes sharp and alert despite the visible stiffness in its movements. Its breathing was measured, controlled, but the set of its shoulders made one thing clear: it was ready to fight. "You are not Thark," the alien said in a voice like stone grinding against metal. The words were heavily accented but understandable, as if his mouth wasn't designed for human speech. "Glad you noticed," Jace replied, keeping the pistol down but ready. "You were dying. I pulled you out. You're welcome." The alien's expression didn't shift into gratitude. Instead, its gaze roamed the medbay, noting the restraints he hadn't used, the door controls within easy reach. "Why?" The single word hung between them, sharp as a blade. Jace didn't answer right away. It wasn't the kind of thing you could explain in a sentence. "Because I don't leave people to die if I can stop it," he finally said. "Even when it's a terrible idea." The alien studied him for a long moment, head tilting slightly as though this was a concept in need of dissection. Then it swung its legs over the side of the bed and stood. Jace took a step back without meaning to. The thing was even taller on its feet, easily brushing the low ceiling with its crest. Every movement carried an unspoken threat, like the twitch of a blade before it strikes. "My name is Karin Valak," the alien said. The way he pronounced it, the syllables hit like hammer blows. "You have taken my life from the void. In my people's law, this cannot be ignored." "Good," Jace said dryly. "I'm big on being ignored." Karin didn't smile. "A Veiler whose life is saved owes a debt that ends only in death. Until it is repaid, the one who saved us becomes our shield and our spear. You are mine to protect. You are mine to follow." "That's not necessary," Jace said carefully. "Really? You can go your way, I'll go mine, and we'll call it even." The alien's gaze hardened, and for the first time Jace saw something under the predator's cold precision, a stubbornness that might outlast suns. "The bond is made. It will not be broken." Jace ran a hand down his face. "Of course it won't." Karin moved toward the door without asking permission, his stride unsteady but still powerful. Jace followed, keeping pace as the alien prowled the narrow corridor, taking in every detail as though memorizing the ship's layout. When the proximity alarms went off, both men turned at once toward the cockpit. Jace's stomach dropped at the sight of the incoming vessels. Sleek, needle-like craft painted in the crimson and black of the Thark Syndicate. "Pirates, slavers, killers for hire. Friends of yours?" Jace asked. Karin's jaw tightened. "Hunters. I was their prize." The comm crackled to life with a voice oozing false civility. "Unidentified freighter, you are carrying stolen property. Power down and prepare for boarding. Compliance will be rewarded with mercy." "Yeah, I've heard that one before," Jace muttered, flipping switches to reroute more power to the shields. The freighter wasn't a warship, but it could take a punch or two if it had to. Karin's hand shot out, gripping the back of Jace's chair. "Let me fight. You're still half dead." The alien's lips pulled back in something too sharp to be a smile. "Half is enough." The first volley rocked the freighter, shields flaring blue against the impact. Jace spun the ship into a rolling dive, trying to shake the smaller, faster craft. But they clung to his tail like wolves on a wounded deer. Karin was already moving, heading for the weapons station. Jace's freighter had only a single turret and a pair of forward cannons, but in Karin's hands they became something else entirely. The alien's claws danced over the controls, and the turret came alive with precise, lethal fire. The first Thark ship exploded in a spray of molten fragments. The second tried to break off. Karin tagged its engines, sending it spiraling into the void. The last ship fled, engines burning hard. Karin didn't fire. Instead, he watched it go with the same cold patience he'd shown Jace in the medbay. "They will tell others," he said simply. "Yeah," Jace agreed. "That's what I'm worried about." Karin left the weapons station and returned to the cockpit, his movements slower now, the strain visible in the way his shoulders sagged. But when he looked at Jace, there was something new in his gaze, not warmth exactly, but recognition. "You fight like prey that has learned to bite back," he said. Jace allowed himself the ghost of a smile. "You're not the first to tell me that." Karin inclined his head once, as though acknowledging an equal in some unspoken hierarchy. "Then you will survive what comes. Together." Jace almost argued. He almost told Karin that he worked alone, that he didn't need some apex predator shadowing his every move. But the words didn't make it past his teeth. Because somewhere between hauling Karin out of that wreck and fighting off the Thark ships, a part of him had already started counting the alien as more than just a passenger. Still, he wasn't ready to admit it. The freighter drifted back into quiet space, the hum of the engines returning to its steady rhythm. Jace kept his eyes on the starfield ahead, but his mind was already racing. The Tharks wouldn't let this go. If they'd gone to the trouble of caging a Vaylor alive, someone powerful wanted him, and badly. Karin stood silent beside him, still scanning the dark as if expecting more predators to appear at any moment. Finally he said, "You will tell me your name." "Jace Rowan." Karin repeated it slowly as though committing it to memory. "Jace Rowan. My shield. My spear. Until the debt is paid." Jace didn't answer. Outside, the stars kept moving, but the space between them suddenly felt smaller. The next week was a lesson in how fast a whisper could turn into a roar in the void. Jace had been trying to keep his ship's profile low, hopping from fringe station to fringe station, never lingering long enough to leave a trail. But every port felt a little more tense, every set of alien eyes lingering a little too long on Karin when they walked through a market or dockyard. The first sign that something bigger was brewing came on a refueling stop at Station Red Hook. The station's news feeds weren't usually worth glancing at. Smugglers arguing with customs, trade guild price hikes, the occasional pirate skirmish in a distant sector. But the hollow display above the docking hub was running a story Jace couldn't ignore. Grainy footage, timestamped 3 days ago, showed Karin standing behind him in a station corridor, eyes scanning the crowd. The caption read, "Vaylor warlord in service to human captain. Honor bond or hostage." Jace swore under his breath. Karin didn't even flinch at the sight. "They are talking about us," the alien said as if commenting on the weather. "No kidding. And this is the last kind of attention I want." Karin's gaze didn't leave the screen. "The attention is not yours to want. The bond is seen. It will be known." Jace didn't reply. The truth was, the footage was already everywhere. By the time they left Red Hook, the comms picked up a dozen different transmissions discussing the human with the Vaylor shadow. Some were cautious, some mocking, some outright afraid. 2 days later they were approached in open space. No weapons locked, no aggressive maneuvers, just a single shuttle easing into range and broadcasting a diplomatic hail. Jace almost ignored it, but curiosity won out. He opened the channel. A tall, angular being appeared on the hollow, its skin the soft gray of moonlight. "Captain Rowan," it said in a voice as smooth as glass. "I am Envoy Char of the Zethari Council. May I request permission to speak aboard your vessel?" Jace glanced at Karin. The alien's expression was unreadable, but his stance had shifted subtly, ready to move if things went sideways. "Talk," Jace said, keeping his tone flat. Char inclined its head. "Then I will be plain. The Vaylor are not known for serving others. That one stands at your side. The galaxy notices. Some will see this as weakness in his people. Some will see it as strength in yours. Either way, it disrupts the balance." "I didn't do this to make a point," Jace said. "I pulled him out of a burning ship. That's all." "That is never all," Char replied. "The Thark Syndicate had him for a reason. They will not be the only ones interested in reclaiming what you have altered." Karin stepped forward then, his voice cold. "Jace Rowan is not altering anything. The bond exists. It is unbreakable. Those who challenge it will regret the hunt." Char's gaze flicked to him, then back to Jace. "The bond is your choice now, Captain. Guard it, or end it, before the galaxy decides for you. The envoy ended the transmission without waiting for a reply. Jace leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. I hate politicians. Karin's golden eyes were steady. This is not politics. This is blood. And blood always draws predators. It was less than a day before Karin proved right. They'd diverted to an uninhabited moon in the Yara Belt, hoping to lie low and scavenge some parts from an old mining outpost. The place was a graveyard of rusting equipment and collapsed tunnels, the air thin but breathable. Karin insisted on accompanying Jace, saying the surface smelled wrong. The wrongness revealed itself in the form of a beast, twice the size of a man, all sinew and claws, skin like stone. It lunged from a collapsed shaft, jaws snapping. Jace dove aside, rolling to his feet with his rifle up, but Karin was already between him and the creature. The alien moved like liquid steel, sidestepping the first charge, slashing deep into the beast's flank with a forearm blade that had sprung from beneath his wrist. The creature shrieked, spun, came again. Jace fired a burst into its exposed side, the impact staggering it long enough for Karin to close in and drive the blade into its throat. When it was over, the predator lay twitching in the dust. Karin wiped his blade clean, glancing at Jace. You are quick. Your weapon is small, but you aim with a hunter's mind. Jace looked at the dead creature. You knew it was here. I knew something was here. The air told me. This was training. You used me as bait? Karin tilted his head slightly. You lived. That is the point. Jace shook his head, muttering, You're impossible. But the truth was, he felt the rush of survival in his veins, the old soldier's satisfaction of walking away from something that should have killed him. They stripped the mining outpost of anything worth taking and returned to the freighter. But when they hit orbit, a transmission was already waiting, bouncing through encrypted channels. The sender was unknown. The message was simple, You are marked. Release the Veiler and live. Refuse and you will not see the next star. Jace played it twice, then deleted it. Guess the galaxy's made its choice for me, he said. Karin was silent for a long moment. Then he said, They think you are prey. They will learn. The learning began sooner than either of them expected. 3 hours later, a formation of sleek gunships appeared on the freighter's long-range scans, running dark until they were close enough to burn hard toward intercept. Jace threw the ship into evasive maneuvers, but the gunships had speed and coordination on their side. He pushed the engines until the panels rattled, dodging between asteroid fragments, forcing their pursuers into narrow gaps. Karin manned the turret again, his shots precise and unhurried. One gunship went down in flames, another spun off into the belt, trailing debris. The last two held formation, driving them toward open space where speed would end the fight quickly. Jace pulled hard on the controls, diving toward a dense cluster of rocks. At the last second, he flipped the ship belly up, firing thrusters in a maneuver that sent them slingshotting around a massive boulder. The pursuing gunships overshot, and Karin's fire shredded them before they could correct. When the wreckage drifted silent, Jace let the freighter settle back into a steady burn. His hands were tight on the controls, his pulse still hammering. They'll send more, he said. Yes, Karin replied. And when they do, we will be ready. The alien's voice carried no bravado, just certainty. And in that moment, Jace realized he believed him. But belief didn't change the fact that they were being hunted. The Tharks weren't operating alone anymore. Whoever wanted Karin had reach and resources enough to send wave after wave. Jace turned his eyes to the stars ahead. We need to take the fight to them. Karin's gaze sharpened. Now you think like a hunter. The coordinates Karin gave him were buried in a dead sector, the kind of place no sane captain visited without a fleet at their back. On every chart Jace pulled up, it was nothing but black space littered with the bones of old battles, wrecks left to drift until they became part of the void. Somewhere in that darkness, Karin said, the Arkan Dominion kept their prize cages. The freighter had been stripped down to its leanest configuration. No cargo, redundant systems offline to make room for more power to engines and shields. Jace stood in the cockpit beside Karin, studying the sensor readouts as the station resolved into view. It was a fortress. A spiked ring of steel and armor, bristling with weapons, floating at the heart of a field of shattered ships. No traffic. No beacons. No reason to exist except to keep something in, or out. Once we are inside, there will be no path to retreat, Karin said, his voice even but his eyes locked on the station. That was the point of leaving the cargo behind, Jace replied. Less to lose. The plan had been simple enough in theory. Slip in cloaked under the shadow of a drifting hulk, breach one of the maintenance ports, and pray the Dominion's internal defenses weren't half as bad as their exterior ones. It was the kind of plan that depended on a lot of people making mistakes. Jace had never trusted luck, but Karen had insisted. Predators do not wait for the trap to close, the Veiler had said. We bite the hand that sets it. The approach was smooth until the last 20 seconds, when a sudden sweep of active sensors lit them up. Jace cursed, jamming the freighter hard against the curve of the hulk, hull plating groaning as it scraped along the dead ship's spine. Alarms flared across the console. We've got 30 seconds before they have a weapons lock, Jace said. Karen didn't hesitate. Go. Jace fired thrusters, slingshotting the freighter toward the station's maintenance ring. A burst from the forward cannons blew the docking seals apart, and the ship's landing struts bit into the jagged metal. They were inside before the station's point defense guns could track them. The air inside was cold and tasted faintly of metal and disinfectant. They moved quickly through narrow service corridors, the lights overhead dim and flickering. Jace's rifle was steady in his hands, but Karen moved like he was born in shadows, every step silent, every turn calculated. When they reached the central hangar, Jace stopped cold. Cages. Dozens of them. Each one holding something different. Scaled titans with jaws that could shear steel, winged predators with talons like swords, chitin-plated beasts that paced endlessly in confined spaces. The Dominion hadn't just been after Karen, they'd been collecting apex species from across the galaxy. And they were starving them. Karen's breath came slow but deep, the muscles in his jaw tight. They break them. Bend them. Make them serve. Not anymore, Jace said. He moved to the control station. The interface was alien, but the principles were the same: power feeds, containment fields, failsafes. He started bypassing them, fingers flying over the controls. Warning sirens began to pulse. In the cages, some of the predators lifted their heads, sensing the change. A voice cut through the alarms. Cold, commanding. Step away from the console, human. Jace turned. A tall figure in black armor stood at the far end of the hangar, flanked by Dominion soldiers. The commander's helmet visor reflected the red glow of the alarms. You cannot control them, the commander said. Release them and you will die with them. Karen stepped between Jace and the soldiers, drawing himself to his full height. Better to die free than live as prey. The first shot rang out and the hangar erupted into chaos. Karen moved like a blade in a storm, cutting through the soldiers with brutal precision. Jace dropped two with his rifle, ducked behind a support column and went back to the controls. A massive, clawed hand slammed into the glass of the nearest cage, the predator inside snarling with hunger. Jace overrode the final lock and the field dropped. The beast tore through the opening with a roar that rattled the walls. The other cages followed. The hangar became a war zone. Freed predators tore into the Dominion soldiers, scattering them in a storm of claws and teeth. Jace darted through the chaos, keeping low, moving toward Karen's position. He found the Veiler locked in combat with the commander. The Dominion's armor absorbed most blows, but Karen's strikes were relentless, driving the larger opponent back step by step. A sudden slash of the commander's blade caught Karen across the side, the cut deep enough to stagger him. Jace didn't think. He raised his rifle and fired twice into the commander's visor. The armor cracked, the figure fell. Karen dropped to one knee, blood running dark over his mottled skin. His breath came ragged, but his eyes found Jace's. Pack brother, he said, the word carrying the weight of something ancient and unshakable. Jace crouched beside him, slinging Karen's arm over his shoulder. Come on. We're not done yet. They moved together through the wreckage of the hangar, dodging both predators and collapsing machinery. The station's structural alarms screamed now, the damage from the freed beasts spreading fast. Jace spotted an auxiliary bay and steered them toward it. The freighter's engines roared to life the moment they were aboard. Jace threw it into a burn, breaking free of the docking clamps just as the first chain of explosions tore through the station's ring. Behind them, the fortress came apart in a bloom of fire and debris, scattering into the void. By the time they were safely beyond the debris field, Karen had passed out in the medbay. Jace sat in the cockpit, watching the distant flashes of dying lights fade into the dark. The comm channels were already alive with news. Someone had recorded the destruction, the freed predators, the human captain at the center of it all. The image would spread. The story would grow. And with it, humanity's place in the galaxy would change. Hours later, Karen woke. He was pale, weaker than Jace had ever seen him, but his voice was steady. Debt repaid. Jace leaned against the bulkhead. So this is where you walk off into the stars? Karen's golden eyes narrowed. Debt repaid, he repeated, but the bond remains. Wherever you go, I hunt at your side. Jace allowed himself a thin smile. Good. Something tells me the universe is going to need us. The freighter's engines carried them forward into the endless dark, two hunters bound not by chance, but by choice, leaving the galaxy to figure out what had just happened, and what might happen next. The galaxy was quieter now, but in a way that felt almost unnatural. In the weeks since the final stand at Vega Prime, the hyperlanes carried fewer warships, fewer emergency convoys. The constant static of intercepted battle transmissions had faded from the comms. It should have been a relief, but for Captain Elias Cade, peace had always been an unfamiliar companion, one he wasn't sure he could trust. He stood on the balcony of the Terran embassy on Palisade Station, the sprawling diplomatic hub of the Mid-Arm territories. Beyond the transparent shielding, a million lights glittered in the blackness. Merchant barges, sleek patrol cutters, alien courier craft. Life had surged back into the station's arteries, but the memory of its near destruction still clung to every shadowed corridor. Behind him, heavy footsteps approached. He didn't need to turn to know who they belonged to. You're going to wear a groove in that deck plating, Ralvek rumbled. Elias glanced back at the towering Threxan, the apex predator he'd once dragged, half-dead, from a smuggler's pit on a nameless moon. Ralvek was clean now, his armor repaired and polished, his amber eyes watchful. The scars remained, across his hide, across the friendship they'd forged under fire. Just thinking, Elias said, his voice low. You do that too much, Ralvek replied. In my culture, thinking is what gets you eaten. Acting is what keeps you alive. Elias smirked faintly. And yet here you are. Alive. Thinking. Ralvek bared his teeth, not in threat, but in that strange predatory grin he used when he was amused. Only because a reckless human made a very bad decision in my favor. They stood in silence for a moment, both gazing at the traffic beyond the glass. Somewhere out there, fleets were rebuilding, alliances renegotiated, old grudges repackaged as diplomatic courtesies. But for once, neither of them was running toward or away from a battle. What will you do now? Elias asked. Ralvek's gaze didn't move from the stars. Go home. I've been gone too long. My people will have questions. Many will see my survival as weakness. They will not understand. They'll understand when they see what you've done, Elias said. What we've done. Perhaps, Ralvek replied. Or perhaps they will try to kill me for the honor of the hunt. We Threxans are consistent. There was no bitterness in his tone, only acceptance. Elias had learned that Ralvek didn't fear death, not in the way humans did. What he feared was dishonor. And yet, saving billions of lives in the final siege had not been a Threxan act. It had been something else entirely. And you? Ralvek asked suddenly. Elias hesitated. He'd been offered commands, powerful ships, prestigious postings. He'd been told he could write his own orders, chart his own destiny. But the war had burned something out of him, or maybe it had burned something into him. The idea of sitting on a bridge, barking orders while others bled, felt hollow now. I don't know, Elias admitted. I think I've had enough of being the man with the plan. Maybe it's time I figure out what living looks like without a battle on the horizon. Ralvek gave a slow nod. Strange. You sound almost like a Threxan elder when they speak of their final hunt. Seeking quiet before the end. Let's not call it the end just yet, Elias said dryly. I'm still breathing. They were interrupted by the chiming of the embassy doors. A young aide, human barely past cadet age, stepped in with an awkward salute. Captain Cade, the council is ready for you. They want your joint statement on the Threxan-Terran Accords. Elias shot Ralvek a sidelong glance. Our big diplomatic moment. Your idea, human, Ralvek replied. I still think speeches are for prey animals trying to impress predators. Then try not to look like you're about to eat someone, Elias said, already striding toward the council chamber. The room was immense. Tiered seating, banners of a dozen worlds, hollow projectors casting planetary emblems in a rotating halo. The murmuring of delegates filled the air. When Elias and Ralvek entered, the voices hushed. The sight of a human captain and a Threxan war leader walking side by side was still enough to command attention. Elias stepped to the podium, his speech already committed to memory. He didn't speak of victories or enemies vanquished. He spoke of the moments in between, the times they'd chosen mercy instead of vengeance, trust instead of suspicion. He spoke of the day he had found a dying predator and decided his life was worth saving. When he finished, the chamber was silent for a heartbeat, then erupted into applause, scattered at first, then swelling until it filled the dome. Ralvek said nothing, but his posture shifted, subtly but enough for Elias to recognize it. For a Threxan, it was the equivalent of standing a little taller. After the session, as they left the chamber, Elias caught sight of an incoming transmission on his wrist console. The encryption was old but familiar, military. He hesitated before opening it. The message was short: Cade. New threat. Outer Rim. Coordinates attached. Not council business. You'll want to see this. He felt Ralvek's eyes on him. Peace never lasts, Elias murmured. Ralvek's grin returned, sharper this time. Then perhaps our hunt is not over after all. Elias didn't reply immediately. He glanced once more at the bustling station beyond the embassy's windows. Somewhere out there, in the dark, trouble was waiting. And as much as he told himself he wanted quiet, a part of him, the part that had pulled Ralvek from that pit, the part that couldn't walk away from a fight worth having, was already deciding to answer the call. He looked at Ralvek. One more? Ralvek tilted his head in that predatory way. One more. They walked toward the docking bays together, side by side, two predators of entirely different worlds bound by a single stubborn truth. Neither of them was built for standing still. And somewhere in the shifting constellations beyond, the galaxy was already changing again.